say your name for me, and then tell me a little bit about your life and dogs.
Philip Boyce. I grew up with Goldens and Beagles. Goldens are more just pets. Show Beagles. My first Finnish champion was 1996 on a Beagle. And then finished college and then played around the big city life for a little while. And then when I was living on Long Island, I got my first Weimaraner. And that goes back about 2006. He finished his championship title at 15 months of age. After everywhere I took him, everyone's like, "You're going to show him? You're going to show him? He's beautiful. He's beautiful." And I'm like, okay. So I got back into it that way. And really haven't looked back. People started asking me to show their dogs, and it's just been, a wonderful trip ever since. So,
what was his name? Your one?
Cody.
Cody?
Yeah, I just lost him last year.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I, in fact, last year interviewed William Wakeman.
Oh, nice.
He'd done a series of mosaics in the subway here, and I got to go to his studio where Flo and Topper, the models for the mosaic, crawled all over me to my great delight.
That would be a Weimaraner for you. I love the breed. Wonderful.
Well, as you probably know, what he said he likes about them is that they're a little bit eerie.
Yes. Yeah, my new boy's a little different than the ones I'm used to, but yeah, they're fun dogs. They a lot of energy and want to please you in the worst way, so they definitely do their best.
We are all hoping, of course, that the world will become somewhere where that's easier to achieve. But one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you, Phil, is that we understand that you were instrumental in helping to get some of the clusters going this last July in Pennsylvania. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in March, when I was at York and the show shut down, that was the end of the basically COVID hit. I sat long and hard and thought for a few weeks before I made a decision of telling my club whether we should do or not do our shows. And when it came down to it, there's a few factors that came into my mind. Is one, I knew it was going to be a lot of work, pretty much a full-time job, which it ended up being 6 to 8 hours a day. And two, I looked at it as it was giving something back to the fancy, which was hope of having a show again. Whether we had the show or they got canceled at the end of the day, it was something I did to make sure that people had something to look forward to rather than living in this mundane world we were living in, locked away, couldn't go anywhere. So I wanted to try to give back a little bit. I had a house fire the year before, and the fancy was very supportive of everything during the house fire and everything. So I just wanted to give back to everyone and give them something to look forward to like they gave to me.
Talk a little bit about what the steps you took were and how
Sure.
it worked.
So basically, my first step was trying to get in touch with the governor's office, thinking that's where I should go. And basically that went nowhere for weeks. Could get anyone on the phone, could get anyone to return calls. It was a big headache and driving me nuts. So I was driving one night and I was like thinking, going, all right, who else can I contact? So I contacted the county commissioners for the Columbia County where my shows are held. Wrote them a really long email in full detail of everything we were planning for the shows, all the safety measures we've been putting in place, and why we think we should be able to have our shows. And they wrote back in overwhelming support of us moving forward, but said we had to contact the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So leading up to all that, as while I was trying to get in touch with the governor's office, I had written all the rules, like working on that and stuff. And it's funny, when the AKC's guidelines came out, my rules matched about 85%. So at least I was on the right page on that. So the health department took about another 2.5 weeks, and that went nowhere. No one answering phones, no one returning phone calls. So I enlisted the help of the Pennsylvania Dog Federation and their president, Darren. And he used some of his legislative connections in Harrisburg to kind of push the Department of Health to recognize us that we needed an answer. And instead of going just for my shows, we went for overall blanket approval for dog shows in the state, and were granted it as long as we followed CDC and Department of Health guidelines.
So a lot of this was an exercise in learning how bureaucracies work.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of clubs, what I learned is a lot of clubs don't have people necessarily that have experience in government or working with governments or knowing how to work through and reading between the lines. And I wrote government contracts in one of my jobs for years, and worked with multiple different government agencies. My dad worked for the federal government his whole life, so I kind of knew my way around and how to talk to people and how to pull out what I needed and how to interpret certain things better than I think a lot of these clubs don't have. And so I think a lot of these clubs that cancel their shows have run into railroads where they read something that says, oh, you have to do this, this, and this from the state. But they're not really reading how the state's applying that rule or seeing how they're using it in other examples, and kind of just going and canceling because they just don't want it. They hit a roadblock and they don't know how to get around it. I always know there's a way around everything pretty much. So yeah, I just kept working at it, and we finally got the approval, and went from there and continued our planning, and shows were very successful.
Do you feel that it's possible that it would be helpful if more clubs had liaisons educated in this kind of process?
Yeah, I actually just reached out to Glenn at the AKC and asked about putting a handbook together for clubs.
I'm going to ask you to take that back, Phil, just because since everybody may not know who everybody else is.
Oh, okay.
Could you say I reached out to Glenn and have his full name, which I think is Lycan, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I reached out to Glenn Lycan, who's, I don't know his exact title, but in the operations department as the manager, the director or something. And about putting a handbook together for to send out to all the clubs, at least digitally, that shows ring layouts, how to do ring setups, what rules you need to have in place, some sample places to buy supplies at, what you need to tell your judges, like kind of like a laundry list of everything you do for a show normally and adding on all the stuff you need to do on top of it for COVID.
So this eventually will just become, we would love it all to go away, but it's just another set of protocols in a field that has many protocols.
Correct. Yes. It's basically putting steps in place that just ensure people's safety. Since my shows, I've traveled all over the United States, been shows in Nevada, Texas, Wisconsin, Tennessee, all over. I mean, and I've seen good shows. Yeah, and I've seen good shows and I've seen bad shows where I've been disappointed in the way they're set up, and I've seen great shows where I think they did a wonderful job. The biggest thing I can stress to clubs is enforcement and diligence and staying on top of it throughout the 4 days, or how long your cluster is, and just make sure you have people enforcing the rules, and that you actually have enough club members, or if you don't, hiring a professional organization to help you out with the management of the show.
Do you feel that word of mouth is helpful, that more people hear, as I hope they will from us, that this is possible if you do it right?
Yeah, I mean, word of mouth helps a lot. The AKC putting stuff out about it. I have people coming up to me all the time going, oh, your shows are wonderful, your shows are wonderful. And I'm like, you can tell me that you didn't like this show or that show and you like mine better or whatever they're telling me. And I just tell them one thing, call the AKC. Because unless it comes from them, it's not going to get out as well as it does otherwise. I mean, this word of mouth will help, but I think coming from like a distribution source would be better.
And how many shows did you wind up holding, Bill?
We had a 4-day cluster with over 2,000 dogs a day.
All breed?
All breed show, yep. Mm-hmm. So we had over 200 motorhomes. Everything was spaced out. We had distancing and spacing in the rings, and everything was marked with markers. Masks were required in all buildings and under all tents. And actually, we were approaching the show. The state changed their rules and said public spaces are required too. So basically, you had to have your mask on unless you're at your vehicle. We did no inside grooming. So we had you just groomed at your vehicle like you would at some of the outdoor shows you go to. So it was great. I mean, everyone seemed to have fun. There was a lot of people there, but at the same time, everyone was adhering to the rules. I had very few incidents of people not wearing masks. A lot of times people just forget because it was brand new and you just kind of get used to the system and stuff. But I have not heard of, I've heard of one case since we've started this of someone having COVID at a dog show. And that was last week.
That was statistically pretty anomalous. That's reflective of any general. Feels as if that would be reflective of any general potential contagion. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be cases of things happening at dog shows. It's just the more shows we have and the more people that go, eventually you're gonna have cases pop up at dog shows. The fact that there's only been one reported one so far since July is, I think, amazing and a testament to how hard a lot of these clubs and superintendents and the AKC are working to keep us safe.
Do handlers have to wear them actually in the ring?
Yes. Yeah, over your nose and mouth at all times.
Suggesting that one of the challenges must have been the well-worn technique of chewing your liver before you hand it to your... exactly. I've done that a few times. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a mask on. But I've seen handlers like that where the gaiters, they stick it into the gaiter. I'm like, that's kind of gross. But everyone adapts and they learn new systems of where to put the bait rather than in your mouth, and you learn, and it's funny. It is funny watching people. Some people still put it in their mouths and they'll stick their hand up their mask and pull it. I'm like, what are you doing? So it's amusing to watch some of it. Well, there has to be a little humor out of all of this. I interviewed David Fry for this series, and he was wearing a mask that was a Brittany.
Okay.
You say you've been all over the country, Phil. What's the general spirit been?
Overall, people want dog shows. They want to follow the rules. So everyone's spirits are up in terms of that. People are starting to get a little sick of this. They're over it kind of feeling, but at the same time, when cases spike in certain areas, they get worried again. So people know it's real. I think at least now they do. And I think people, I think the biggest thing I've seen or heard from people is inconsistency from show to show, where I think a handbook or some type of guidelines, a little more strict than just their best practices list that they have from the AKC, would go a long way in keeping everyone knowing what's expected of them at a show, no matter what show they go to.
That sounds as if it's really going to be the best possible outcome to this.
In my opinion, it is. I just feel like there should be set guidelines. Yeah, if you have that and everyone knows what to expect at shows, and like I've had the debate over wearing masks, and what happens if the local community where the show's being held doesn't require masks, or the state that the shows are in don't require masks. My argument to that is always, well, you have people coming from all over the country to shows every weekend at this point. So you could have someone from Washington State being at a show in Florida, or vice versa. So it doesn't really matter where the show is being held. The rules need to be the same across the country.
Yes, it sounds as if what you're really applying is the general principles of showing anyway, which is that this is a community unto itself with its own regulations and formalities, and those should simply apply everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Making it, as you say, much easier for people to conduct themselves in a field that is tremendously travel-driven and peripatetic anyway.
Yes, and I've suggested that to the AKC, and at this point, I can't. I don't work there, so.
But it's on the table.
Hopefully, yeah, it's been brought up to their attention. So,
just another set of hardworking bureaucrats to whom you have to communicate persistently.
Yeah, if you push your idea hard enough, they listen. Hopefully we can get something done and get something a little more consistent going on. Last thing I want to see is an outbreak at a show site, because that's just going to shut down shows across the country, not just there. Having a case or two pop up at a show is one thing, but if we have a massive outbreak, that could end dog shows as we know them.
In your local area, have you started developing a community or a team who works with you to plan?
No, not really. That's not a bad idea, though. I did start a consulting group. I've managed 2 breed specialties, Colonial Rottweiler and a local burner club, for their specialties and did all their COVID safety and helped with ring stewarding and enforcement and stuff like that. And those went well. But not so much as like a full team board and having like, that's not a bad idea to start like a team of people throughout the country and having groups in each region.
One of the things we're discovering is that every area has found a different kind of solution, not to take away your point about the importance of general guidelines, but the community tends to respond in accordance with its own strengths. So, for instance, in Washington state, there seemed to be a core group of people who are all working together to help everybody else make this happen.
Yes, and there's the Southern Handlers League in Texas does that as well. I guess me in the Northeast. Yeah, and I mean, and maybe those groups should get together and discuss and come up with more standards and stuff. I've seen things I've liked and disliked at all those locations. So
I wasn't wrong about the Holy Grail. There's an element of knight in shining armor here.
I guess people keep it's not something I was expecting to do this year, and after my year last year with the house fire and stuff, it was just something I thought I should get back. And I think the biggest problem we have with the sport is people giving back to it. The club's dwindling in numbers, people not wanting to volunteer for shows. A lot of this time you'll set up these shows for people and they're like, there's no club members to work it. So the biggest thing is everyone has to get back. So all the handlers out there need to get back to their local clubs that they live in, near where they live, as well as all the exhibitors, all these new owner handlers that are out there. They need to join clubs and participate more. It's not just about running around the ring and getting a ribbon. It's about a community and giving back to it. And we need to kind of go back to that. And I think hopefully, if anything comes out of COVID, hopefully that does.
That sounds like the good place to end. I have only one other question, which is the one thing that doesn't come up a lot. We're in this because we love dogs. Show dogs are very sensitive. They pick up a lot on energy. Do you think they have been affected in any way?
Mine, personally, I haven't seen it. So I can't really respond to that beyond that. I think a lot of us are on the road more, so that may stress them out more just from we're traveling more for shows. You have to go further distances to get to shows. So that actually always puts taxing on the animals. But we try to, I stop as much as I can. The Love's travel centers have started putting in dog parks. So I try to stop and let them stretch their legs and run around and just try to make them as much as pets as possible when I can and let them be dogs.
Where are you going next?
Home. I'm off next weekend.
That must feel lovely to be able to say.
Yes, I have a litter at home that's been raised. I've seen them 3 days out of their whole life so far, so it'd be nice to go spend a week with them before they leave.
Sort of like an army dad.
Yeah, exactly.
So a litter of Weimaraners?
A litter of German Shorthair Pointers.
I'll bet they're all spoken for.
I would probably have a few left. If anyone's interested.
I'll be in touch, because I have to say that one thing that I have come out of this feeling is I really need a dog again.
Yeah, no, it's a great pedigree, and they're actually beautiful, very consistent litter. So we're very excited. So I have to go make my pick and keep which one I'm keeping. But I go out to Wilmington, Ohio after that, then Marshall, Texas, Yuma, Arizona, Gulfport, Mississippi, and then end up back up in Morgantown, PA, or Florida. I don't know yet. I'm entered at both, so we'll see where that plays out.
Well, I hope it goes very well for you and that you're carrying your mission with you, because it seems important.
Yes. Thank you very much.